making headlines this hour. The Maldives welcomes the decision by the United States to remove Syria from its list of state sponsors of terrorism. Legislation concerning the state confiscation of assets obtained through criminal activity, titled the Asset Recovery Bill, is submitted to Parliament. And Maldives Monetary Authority, or MMA, absorbs 3 billion Maldivian rupiah, equivalent to 194.55 million US dollars from the economy over the past year as part of an aggressive effort to mop up excess MVR liquidity and alleviate mounting pressure on the country's foreign exchange market.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to PSM News in English with me, Abdullah Ahil. Now the news in detail. President Dr. Mohammad Muiz sends a message of condolences to Pakistan Prime Minister Muhammad Shahbaz Sharif following a fire at the Pakistan Institute of Medical Sciences, or PIMS, that claimed the lives of newborn infants. President Muiz said he was deeply saddened to learn of the tragedy and expressed sympathy to the families who lost their children. He said the government and the people of the Maldives were keeping the bereaved families in their thoughts and praying for them to find strength and solace during the period of grief. On behalf of the Maldives, President Muiz also conveyed condolences to Prime Minister Sharif, the Pakistani government, and the people of Pakistan. He expressed hope that the ongoing investigation into the incident would help identify the cause of the fire and lead to stronger measures to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Minister of Foreign Affairs Ruti Adam will call on Organization of Islamic Cooperation, or OIC, member states to push for implementation of the Gaza ceasefire roadmap and hold Israel accountable for violations of international law when she addresses an OIC foreign ministers meeting in Saudi Arabia.
The meeting of foreign ministers of Islamic countries, which will be held in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, will discuss Israel's ongoing violations of international law against the Palestinian people, including the seizure and expansion of Palestinian territory, as well as the measures being taken in response to these actions. The meeting is being convened at the invitation of Saudi Arabia. The foreign minister is scheduled to speak at the meeting and said the Maldives would continue to advocate for the rights of the Palestinian people. She also said the Maldives would work to hold Israel accountable for its actions. The Maldivian government has consistently called for the rights of the Palestinian people to be protected and for the establishment of an independent Palestinian state. In this regard, the Maldives advocates for a return to the 1967 borders and recognizes East Jerusalem as the capital of an independent Palestinian state. In addition, the Maldives continues to publicly advocate at international forums for Israel to be held accountable for the violations it is committing. In addition to discussing the Palestinian issue, the OIC meeting is also scheduled to address matters related to the appointment of the organization's Secretary General. The foreign minister also said she would hold consultations with the foreign ministers of fellow Arab countries on the sidelines of the meeting.
The Maldives welcomes the decision by the United States to remove Syria from its list of state sponsors of terrorism. In a statement by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Maldivian government congratulated Syria on the development and wished the Syrian people continued peace, stability, and prosperity. The Maldives said it hoped the decision would support Syria's recovery and reconstruction efforts and help improve the lives and livelihoods of the Syrian people. The government also reaffirmed its support for Syria's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity, as well as a peaceful, inclusive, Syrian-owned and Syrian-led process that fulfills the legitimate aspirations of the Syrian people. The parliament approves the appointment of Jamila Ali Khalid as the Maldives ambassador to the United Kingdom. Under the Maldives Foreign Service Act, the president is required to seek parliamentary approval for the appointment of ambassadors and non-resident ambassadors to countries where the Maldives maintains diplomatic representation. Accordingly, President Dr. Mohamed Muiz submitted Jamila's appointment as the Maldives ambassador to the United Kingdom to the Parliament for approval. The position was previously held by Urtisham Adam. However, the post became vacant after President Muiz appointed Urtisham as Minister of Foreign Affairs. The President's nomination of Jamila was referred to the Foreign Relations Committee for consideration. The committee subsequently approved a motion recommending that the Parliament grant its approval for her appointment. Following the presentation of the committee's report to the Parliament, all 59 members present at the sitting voted unanimously in favor of approving Jamila's appointment. Jamila has extensive experience in the field of foreign affairs. She previously served as the Maldives ambassador to Germany and also served as vice president of the Civil Service Commission. Legislation concerning the state confiscation of assets obtained through criminal activity, titled the Asset Recovery Bill, is submitted to Parliament.
Introduced on behalf of the government by Ali Fazad, the Member of Parliament for Central Formula, the measure is designed to block perpetrators of major crimes from utilizing their ill-gotten financial gains and permanently close avenues for illicit profit. Under the draft framework, the state would be empowered to seize both assets acquired through criminal behavior and property used to commit offenses spanning money laundering, terrorism-related crimes, homicide, drug, human and weapons trafficking, sexual exploitation, counterfeiting, corruption, and major organized crime. The statute authorizes confiscation in tax evasion cases exceeding $32,425.42 and robbery, theft, embezzlement, or smuggling exceeding $6,485.08 alongside any major felony yielding property. Legal action could proceed even for offenses committed outside the Maldives or prior to enactment, allowing asset seizures regardless of whether an accused individual is convicted, subject to instructions issued by the Prosecutor General. The legislation directs the executive branch to establish an independent asset management authority under the Ministry of Finance and Public Enterprises within 30 days of enactment. Accountable to Parliament, the agency would register, value, and maintain confiscated assets while managing victim restitution claims. A recovered asset fund would be established within 60 days to finance crime prevention and compensation. The bill outlines comprehensive foreign asset freezing procedures, empowers the Prosecutor General to seek international assistance, and accompanies companion amendments submitted to the Criminal Procedure Act.
Parliament passes an amendment to the Decentralization Act, allowing the government to acquire land under the jurisdiction of local councils for development projects.
Tuladu Member of Parliament Abdul Hannan Abu Bakr submitted the amendment to allow the government to acquire land within council jurisdictions for development projects. The Decentralization Committee introduced further amendments while reviewing the bill. Under the government-proposed amendment, the Cabinet may remove land and other areas from a council's jurisdiction when the government requires them for development projects. The government may acquire such land and areas even before the respective island or city approves and begins implementing its physical development plan. The amendment also requires councils to fully cooperate when the government carries out projects in an island or city for the collective benefit of its residents. It prevents councils from taking actions that obstruct such projects without a valid reason or making decisions that could result in the projects being halted. As part of its review, the Decentralization Committee added a provision requiring the relevant ministry to compensate for investments already made on any land the government acquires from a council's jurisdiction for development projects. Parliament passed the bill with the committee's amendments, with 47 members of Parliament voting in favor and 12 members of Parliament voting against.
Parliament passes a government bill seeking to introduce a new law governing the leasing of uninhabited islands and lagoons in the Maldives.
Tinadu North Member of Parliament Saudullah Hilmi submitted the bill on behalf of the government. The bill outlines procedures for leasing uninhabited islands and lagoons for various purposes, as well as leasing uninhabited islands that have not been designated for a specific purpose. The Maldives Uninhabited Islands Act currently governs the leasing of uninhabited islands and lagoons. The proposed legislation seeks to repeal the existing law and establish the circumstances and procedures under which uninhabited islands and lagoons may be leased. Under the bill, as is currently the case, the President will designate uninhabited islands and lagoons for different purposes. Uninhabited islands may be designated for tourism, fisheries, agriculture, industrial, economic, and social purposes, state purposes, as well as special purposes specified under other laws. With the exception of uninhabited islands designated for tourism and industrial purposes, councils will handle the leasing of islands within their respective jurisdictions. The ministry responsible for a particular lagoon will lease that lagoon for the designated purpose. The bill also sets out who may lease uninhabited islands. For commercial purposes, companies or partnerships registered in the Maldives, sole proprietorships, as well as foreign companies or partnerships re-registered in the Maldives may lease such islands. For purposes other than commercial activities, uninhabited islands may also be leased to any Maldivian citizen, registered businesses, and registered associations. Lagoons may be leased for large and medium-scale industrial activities, economic activities involving an investment of at least $64,851, as well as aquaculture and related activities. Under the bill, an uninhabited island designated for a particular purpose may be leased for 21 years. If an extension is sought, the lease may be extended, provided that the total lease period does not exceed 50 years. The bill also specifies the rent for uninhabited islands and the acquisition cost of lagoons. It states that the ministry responsible for financial matters will determine the acquisition fee for uninhabited islands leased for different purposes. For islands that have not been designated for a specific purpose, the bill allows a maximum lease period of 5 years. The lease may then be extended to a further 5 years. The bill also establishes penalties for violations. A violation of the law on an uninhabited island leased under the 5-year arrangement may result in a fine of up to $32,425, while a violation committed on a leased uninhabited island or lagoon may result in a fine of up to $64,851. Once the new law comes into force, agreements for uninhabited islands and lagoons leased under the existing law, as well as arrangements for islands leased under the 5-year arrangement, will remain valid.
The Parliament approves the appointment of Shammun Hamid as a member of the Human Rights Commission of the Maldives, or HRCM.
The President's Office opened applicants for the position last July, as the term of one of the current HRCM members is due to expire in October. From the applicants, the President submitted the names of 2 candidates who met the required qualifications to the Parliament. The 2 nominees were Shammun Hamid of Henveru, Minas, and Samau Ahmad Najib of Tinadu, Gafdal Atoll. Samau is currently also a member of the HRCM, and her term is set to expire on October 3rd. Shammun Hamid has previously held senior positions at the HRCM, including serving as the Commissioner's Secretary General. Following the interview with the 2 candidates, the relevant parliamentary committee determined that both met the required qualifications and forwarded their names to the Parliament floor. In the vote held in the chamber, Shammun Hamid's appointment was approved unanimously by all members who participated in the vote.
The Minister of State for Climate Change, Environment and Energy, Muhammad Faiz, says the Integrated Sustainable Low-Emission Transport, or ILET project, has yielded significant achievements in improving air quality across the archipelago.
The Islet initiative, funded by the Global Environment Facility or GEF and implemented with technical support from the United Nations Environment Program or UNEP, targets the transport sector, a critical source of emissions on the Maldives' small islands. State Minister Faiz warned that vehicle exhaust contributes disproportionately to poor air quality, which in turn drives respiratory and cardiovascular health problems among residents. He highlighted that Islet's core objectives include establishing a legal and regulatory framework for electric vehicles or EVs, deploying a nationwide charging station network, and developing a national e-mobility roadmap with technical standards. To date, the project has begun procuring and testing EVs and chargers, while training sessions for engineers, policymakers, and sector institutions are underway. Upon completion, the standards will be embedded in relevant ministry regulations, and financing mechanisms will be arranged to help private buyers acquire eco-friendly vehicles. He added, charging infrastructure will also be paired with solar power systems to ensure sustainable operation.
The Maldives Monetary Authority, or MMA, absorbs 3 billion Maldivian rupiah, equivalent to $194.55 million from the economy over the past year as part of an aggressive effort to mop up excess MVR liquidity and alleviate mounting pressure on the country's foreign exchange market.
Speaking at a press conference held at the President's office, MMA Governor Ahmad Munawar announced that the central bank is now expanding these measures to further stabilize the financial system. The MMA reintroduced open market operations, or OMO, on the 23rd of July last year after a decade-long hiatus, targeting a surplus that had swollen significantly in recent years. To accelerate this drain, the central bank has decided to scale up its OMO yields by 10 basis points. In tandem with expanding OMOs, the central bank will tighten commercial bank reserve requirements. Starting this September, the minimum reserve requirement, or MRR, the percentage of commercial bank deposits required to be held at the MMA, will rise from 10.5% to 11%. The central bank plans to review this rate every 3 months, with a target of reaching 13% by the end of next year. The sharp rise in domestic liquidity stems from monetary expansion during the COVID-19 pandemic under the previous administration, which suspended the Fiscal Responsibility Act and printed a total of 8.2 billion Maldivian rupiah, or $531.78 million. According to MMA statistics, this unbacked money creation expanded the circulating MVR supply by 178% and was subsequently converted into long-term bonds on 3 occasions. The resulting surge in liquidity fueled high demand for foreign currency and placed heavy downward pressure on the MVR exchange rate. The central bank has repeatedly reiterated its commitment to implementing structural monetary policy reforms to manage systemic liquidity, safeguard currency stability, and foster long-term macroeconomic stability in the Maldives.
Insights into world business. Nvidia expects to report another quarter of explosive growth when it releases fiscal second quarter results after the market closes, with investors focused on whether demand for artificial intelligence infrastructure remains strong enough to justify the chipmaker's lofty valuation.
Wall Street expects revenue of about 92 billion US dollars and adjusted earnings per share of roughly 2.09 US dollars, slightly above Nvidia's own forecast for quarterly revenue of 91 billion US dollars. The results are likely to hinge on growth in Nvidia's data center business, which has been fueled by spending from major cloud companies racing to build AI capabilities. Investors will also look for updates updates on demand for NVIDIA's Blackwell AI chips and for any signs that customer spending is slowing. Guidance for coming quarters will be closely watched as analysts say the market is increasingly focused on the durability of the AI boom rather than on quarterly earnings beats alone. NVIDIA has consistently exceeded expectations in recent quarters, but its shares have often struggled to rally afterward because of already elevated investor expectations. Investors will also monitor management's comments on China and the impact of U.S. export controls, an area that remains a key uncertainty for the world's most valuable semiconductor company.
Updates on international affairs. The World Food Programme warns that escalating conflicts and shrinking funding were driving global hunger to crisis levels, leaving aid agencies close to having nothing to give at all.
Acting Executive Director Carl Skau said nearly 300 million people were acutely food insecure, triple the level 6 years ago, while WFP received only 40% of the funding it needed last year. Speaking after briefing the UN Security Council, Skau said waiting for famine declarations amounted to a total failure of duty and urged immediate action to protect civilians, infrastructure, and humanitarian workers.
Today I brought to the Council what WFP frontline teams are witnessing every day. I've also had opportunity to visit many of those operations, so I spoke to the Council about how hunger and conflict really looks in practice, how that cycle of hunger and conflict looks in practice, drawing from that first-hand experience during my visits, and that how this vicious cycle is now escalating. And that waiting for a famine being declared is a total failure of duty.
He warned that disruptions around the Strait of Hormuz and Red Sea, combined with escalating Black Sea tensions, had created a triple choking point. Skau said 1/3 of global wheat exports passes through the Bosphorus Strait and cautioned that further Black Sea escalation would have dire consequences for food security worldwide.
Moving on to sports, Netherlands coach Xavi Hernandez promises an attractive style of football, but more importantly, a desire to win during his tenure with the national team.
The former Barcelona midfield great and later coach has signed a 4-year deal through the next World Cup and promised he would look to inject new energy into the Dutch, who were eliminated in the last 32 at this year's finals.
I personally believe a lot in this generation. We have, as you know, we have many talents, but the most important thing for me is to create a team, a group, and a big family in order to compete well.
Xavi is the first foreigner in almost 50 years to take charge of the Dutch since Ernst Happel at the 1978 World Cup, but already describes himself as a devotee of the Dutch total football approach, which the likes of Rinus Michels and Johan Cruyff introduced at Barca, where he played most of his career.
Taking a look at life in Syria, where hammering and lining up stones, restoration teams works in Aleppo's old markets to transform ancient crumbled shops and alleyways into a vibrant hub once again.
Mohammad Yasser Maulawi, director of the first administrative block in Aleppo Governorate that includes Old Aleppo, said more than half of the old markets have already been rehabilitated through joint work led by the Aga Khan Development Network, UNESCO, the Syrian Development Organization, and the Ministry of Culture. The market comprises a network of vaulted stone alleyways and carved wooden facades that was once a major tourist attraction and a busy cosmopolitan trading hub on the ancient Silk Road from China. Its many narrow alleys have a combined length of 13 kilometers, selling everything from soap to jewelry to clothing. Before Syria's ruinous civil war struck, Aleppo was a busy commercial powerhouse and a proud historic center. Its its long heritage on display in ancient landmarks still used by modern-day traders, travelers, or worshippers. The war that erupted across Syria in 2011 exploded into Aleppo in the summer of 2012 when rebel fighters took over the east of the city. The rebels hoped their march into Aleppo marked the beginning of the end for then-President Bashar al-Assad, while the government in Damascus pledged to swiftly drive them out. Neither side achieved those goals, and the war in Aleppo dragged on for more than 4 years. As the fighting ground on, the city itself crumbled under airstrikes from government forces and bombardment by both sides. Sections of the medieval souk, or market, were ruined or burnt down. Gradual efforts started to revive the city following its capture by Assad forces in December 2016. Aleppo's Old City is one of several locations in Syria declared World Heritage Sites by UNESCO, the United Nations Cultural Agency.
And that's all the news we have for today. Thanks for watching PSM News.